The Sand Merchant, built by the Collingwood Shipbuilding Company in Collingwood, Ontario. The Sand Merchant had a length of 252 feet. She had a width of 43 and a depth of 17. For a gross tonnage, the Sand Merchant came in at 1,981 tons, and she came equipped with a triple expansion steam engine. The Sand Merchant was launched on August 27, 1927, and she was a sand dredge, or a sandsucker. For a cargo, she would carry aboard her sand and gravel, and this would be pumped onto her by two centrifugal pumps. When it came time to unload the Sand Merchant, this would happen by two swinging, stiff-legged derricks. Each one of these would be equipped with a 2-yard grab bucket. One of these derricks would be mounted aft of the forecastle. The other one was placed in front of the stack. In 1930, however, both of the derricks were actually removed, and in place of them was put an elevator system along with a conveyor belt. This would discharge to the dock over a swinging boom, which would be mounted aft in front of the stack. Mapes and Friedan operated the Sand Merchant. However, that would change in 1931, and in that year the Royal Trust Company of Montreal would take possession of the Sand Merchant. They would charter her to National Sand and Material Company of Toronto. She would operate on and off in 1932. However, in 1933 she would not operate at all. The Sand Merchant would return to service in 1934, and then in the following years she operated across the Great Lakes, and at times she would also operate on the Canadian East Coast. Overall, the Sand Merchant had a very successful career across the Great Lakes, dredging and sucking sand and gravel to open up canals. Although, despite her successful career, this would all come to a devastating end on October 17th of 1936. The tragic tale in the loss of the Sand Merchant ship is actually quite lengthy. There are a lot of details and information as to what happened to her loss on that night of October 17th. For the sake of time and this episode, though, however, I will do my best to condense and summarize the events and the disaster that happened to her on that night. However, I will do this without sacrificing any key points or information that may lose exactly what happened. I will post a link to the website that goes over the entire loss of her story. Now, without further ado, let's go into the story and the loss and tragic disaster sinking of the Sand Merchant. October 16th, 1936. The Sand Merchant would begin unloading her cargo of sand at Windsor, Ontario. As evening approached and she finished her unloading, she would make her way for the sand pumping grounds, which were just offshore of Point Paley, Ontario. At around 2:30 a.m. on October 17th, the Sand Merchant would begin sucking sand for her next load. She would be bound for delivery to Cleveland, Ohio, later that day. After taking on her final load of cargo of sand and gravel, the Sand Merchant would be cleared for Cleveland, and she would make her way out onto Lake Erie. The captain aboard the Sand Merchant was Captain McClellan. He had actually just finished his dinner that evening and made the decision to go lay down for a nap. He made his way to the rear of the wheelhouse and gave instructions to his second mate, Borio, to give him a call when the vessel was approaching her destination in Cleveland. The weather was calm and fair as they began their way out onto Lake Erie. However, as many stories on this channel would tell, the weather did not stay calm for very long. A northwest wind actually began to blow, and this caused very choppy waves to appear on Lake Erie. These waves would actually begin to come over the decks on the Sand Merchant. But Captain McClellan was not worried about this. However, other captains that were also out on Lake Erie that night were worried, and they decided to anchor. After only 2 hours had passed after Captain McClellan went down for his nap, he was awakened by his second mate. He gave him a warning that the Sand Merchant actually began to take a list to port, though this list was not severe yet, but seemed to be increasing rapidly for no reason. Captain McClellan made the decision to take the wheel himself, seeing as the storm was actually growing in intensity. He brought the Sand Merchant around and checked her down to half speed. After he did this, his men went to go find out why she was listing to port. At around 9 o'clock, things aboard the Sand Merchant went from bad to worse to all out hopeless. The only thing that the crew members could discover about the list was possibly a mishap or damage to the large buoyancy tanks on the port side, and these would be open to the lake. The crew members operated the associated pumps, but got nowhere. If there was a leak, and obviously there was, this would be catastrophic to the Sand Merchant, and she would eventually completely flip over. Not long after discovering the situation of the Sand Merchant and she was actually going to founder, Captain McClellan made the order to his mates, Drinkwater and Boreal. He told them to prepare the lifeboats for launching. As Drinkwater and Boreal were scrambling to secure the lifeboats, other crew members as well started to launch flares from the Sand Merchant. They also threw over mattresses and lit them on fire, all in hopes that other vessels would see the distress of the Sand Merchant and come to aid her. The situation for the 26 crew members aboard the Sand Merchant was at an end. After battling the seas, launching flares, setting mattresses on fire, hoping and praying that somebody would see them and come to help, no help would arrive. However, it is later stated that actually the flares and mattresses were seen by people. However, they did not understand their meaning at the time. Finally, at 10 p.m., the Sand Merchant would roll over and sink, taking with her 19 of her 26 crew members. After the rapid sinking of the Sand Merchant, the lifeboats as well were taken under with her. However, they did eventually resurface, though upside down. The scene that night was one of absolute terror. The crew members were out in the darkness, yelling and cursing, and trying desperately to find their way to the overturned lifeboats. Thankfully, the surviving crew members of the Sand Merchant were able to make their way to the overturned lifeboats, and they would cling on them all night, bobbing all around in the seas. At around 8:30 the next morning, Sunday, October 18th, 2 vessel skippers which were out from Cleveland were somehow startled to see the capsized lifeboats and the people clinging to them yelling and shouting and waving. The Marquette and Bessemer No. 1 maneuvered close to one lifeboat and threw out ropes to bring in the survivors. The other lifeboat was also rescued by the other vessel that was out there. After the survivors were brought onto the rescue vessels, they were immediately given dry clothing and food provisions. These were hot and boosted their spirits. Astonishingly as well, the survivors recovered quite quickly. 10 days later, in the Toronto office of Captain Henry King, examiner of masters and mates, the preliminary inquiry as to the sinking and loss of the Sand Merchant brought some not good moments and questions for Captain McClellan. 3 weeks would go by after the loss of the Sand Merchant, and the U.S. Corps of Engineers would make a survey of shoreline residents west of Cleveland. They were trying to find citizens who may have additional information as to the sinking and her loss that night on October 17th. Again, all in all, 19 crew members lost their lives that night on October 17th, 1936. May they rest in peace. R.G. Coburn. This vessel was a wooden passenger freighter that was built in 1870 in the Thomas Arnold Shipyard of Marine City, Michigan. The Coburn had a length of 193 feet. She had a width of 30 and a depth of 12. She also had a gross tonnage of 867 tons, and she could carry up to 75 people at a time. During the 1860s and 1870s, immigration actually grew rapidly across the eastern states. Transportation ships would carry these immigrants all across them, and the R.G. Coburn was one of them. Passengers aboard the Coburn would actually enjoy her lavish and spacious staterooms. They would also be treated to her hotel-class cuisine as well aboard her. It's safe to say in her day the R.G. Coburn was quite a magnificent vessel. The Coburn was also capable of carrying general cargo, such as wheat and other dry goods. Tragically, the R.G. Coburn would actually only have about 1 year of service before she met a terrible end. It's also worth noting here on her last run she was carrying some 30 barrels of silver ore aboard her. The vessel herself was valued at $40,000 and her cargo $80,000. All in all, the R.G. Coburn met a very short and disastrous fate on October 15th, 1871. October 15th, 1871. The R.G. Coburn was downbound in Lake Huron, and she was coming from Duluth, Minnesota, making her way to Buffalo, New York. The Coburn was carrying her normal cargo of general dry goods and wheat. She also had about 30 barrels of silver ore as well inside of her. The exact number of passengers and people that were on board the R.G. Coburn when she disastrously sank is hard to pinpoint. Some estimates say it was around 52 people that were on board her. Either way, the lives of these people were in for a terrible disaster. As the R.G. Coburn was making her way to her destination in Buffalo, New York, she was just off of Saginaw Bay when a terrible southwest gale began to blow and hit the Coburn. It became all too real very quickly that she was going to be unmanageable in this terrible gale. Whitecaps and choppy waves began to smash into the R.G. Coburn. This caused her rudder to be torn off completely, leaving her helpless in the seas. As the wind and waves continued to batter against the R.G. Coburn, her cargo became loose and shifted inside of her. This caused damage to occur within the R.G. Coburn and definitely did not help her current situation. The storm was so tremendous that it actually tore through the Coburn's rigging. The waves continued to smash against her, and finally it tore off her smokestack. As the smokestack was ripped off, this also caused her lifeboats to be ripped from their davits and turned them bottom side up as well. The previously mentioned cargo of silver ore barrels that had come loose began to smash again against the inside of the Coburn. This tore holes in her and allowed water to flow in. The situation was devastating. It was around 4 a.m. when the Coburn had lost her rudder that had been torn off. However, the entirety of the events that befell the Coburn was about 5 hours in total. The captain aboard the Coburn that terrible night was Captain Gilbert DeMont, and this would be his last command. The Coburn came fitted with 2 lifeboats and 2 yawl boats. At around 9 a.m., 2 of the 4 boats were successfully launched. About 8 people filled one yawl boat, while 10 men occupied the other one. The second mate, 12 crewmen, and 6 passengers took to the yawl boat, and they were saved. However, the entire Texas deck was ripped off and floated off of the RG Coburn when she eventually foundered and sank. Captain DeMont, with 15 crewmen and 16 passengers, were aboard this portion of the ship. They were, tragically, never seen again. Again, the numbers for this vessel and the incident that happened aboard her are just an approximate. Surviving crew members from the RG Coburn said, had her rudder not been torn off, she likely could have weathered through this storm on Lake Huron. Some estimates say that it may have actually been her max number of 75 passengers and crew. To this day and recording of the video, the RG Coburn has not been found. Divers still search for her, along with her buried treasure of silver ore. The Soo City, another wooden passenger freighter steamer. Built in 1888 by F.W. Wheeler and Company in West Bay City, Michigan. The Soo City was built and designed for the Soo River Run. She would be on this route for her first 3 seasons in operation. Later, in 1891, she would actually be chartered to the Northern Michigan Line. This was to help the services of the city of Charlevoix and Lawrence for routes between Chicago and Mackinac Island. They would also be stopping at Traverse City, Petoskey, and Harbor Springs, Michigan. The Soo City had a length of 171 feet. She had a width of 33 and a depth of 12. She also had a gross tonnage of 670 tons. In 1894, the Soo City would actually enter her longest period of service on a single route. Being under a pool arrangement, the Soo City was transferred to the newly formed Grand Rapids and Chicago Steamboat Company. These were owners of the City of Holland, with W.R. Owen as its president. The Soo City had a really good run, around 17 years of service, and she would be chartered to multiple different companies across the Great Lakes. However, that being said, on December 2nd of 1908, the Soo City would be lost with all hands. The Soo City had a very good career, and she became a popular vessel, especially for her time. After her around 17 to possibly 20 years of service, she actually would be sold. The Soo City was sold to Felix Jackson of Velasco, Texas, and Jackson had made plans to put the Soo City in service along the Texas coast on the Gulf of Mexico. As the Soo City departed from the Great Lakes and for her final and tragic voyage, she would be under the command of Captain F.V. Doherty of Milwaukee. The Soo City left Michigan City, Indiana, and this would be on November 1st. She would then reach Ogdensburg, New York on November 11th. And then the Soo City actually changed captains over to Captain John G. Dillon of Brooklyn. He was assigned to take the Soo City down the St. Lawrence River and then south along the Atlantic coast to Velasco. It's also worth mentioning here that the Soo City was not lost on the Great Lakes, but the Atlantic. As the Soo City was making her way to her destination, a terrible winter storm would begin to brew across the Great Lakes, And this same storm would actually move east to the North Atlantic, right in the path of the Sioux City. It's also worth mentioning as well here in our story that several other vessels on the Great Lakes were also lost or driven ashore. There were many lives lost. The exact and last moments of the Sioux City are shrouded in mystery. In fact, no bodies came ashore, and sailors also wondered why the Sioux City was still in the North Atlantic. What gave clues to her eventual loss was when wreckage came washing ashore near North Sydney, Nova Scotia. This was around December 4th when the wreckage was discovered. In total, 19 crew members lost their lives and were lost with the Sioux City, never to be found. People theorized as to what could have caused her disappearance, some stating that it wasn't just the storm itself, but damage to her rudder, or possibly she was heavy laden with ice. Either way, it's anyone's guess as to what sank the Sioux City. In total, though, the destination would take about 10 days for the Sioux City to reach Texas. But, again, she did not make it, and as of the recording of this video, her wreckage has never been found. And with that, we bring this episode to a conclusion. These 3 vessels were largely unknown to me. I have heard of the Sand Merchant, but I did not really know much of her disappearance until I received my new books here recently and did some more digging online, and then I found out, like, oh wow, there's actually a lot that goes into detail, as I said earlier, about what happened. And it's strange that people haven't heard of this shipwreck a lot more of. I could be wrong. Maybe you guys do. You are a very smart audience. Maybe you do know of the Sand Merchant, but I for sure didn't really know much about her at all. And I found her story amazing and compelling. Yeah, definitely do check out the links I put in the descriptions here for all these ships where I get my sources, not just online but with books. Read her full story. Read all the vessel stories, and just appreciate these lives and these people that what they went through. It should never be lost. It should never be forgotten. We are just coming off of the 50th anniversary of the Edmund Fitzgerald, and now the Carl D. Bradley sinking is coming up here. That's another terrible loss on Lake Michigan that I want to give acknowledgement to, and just recognize the poor men and lives, that were lost on her. And maybe I'll cover the Carl D. Bradley, the Daniel J. Morrell, and of course the Edmund Fitzgerald are, I guess, the big 3 of the Great Lakes. Maybe I'll cover the Carl D. Bradley. Don't hold me to that, but she is actually one of the big 3, at least in my opinion. She is one of my favorite stories and ships as well, after the Kamloops. But now I'm just rambling to you guys. But let me know what you guys thought about these 3 lesser known ships here, and if you come across any more details or possibly survivor accounts, or just any. I welcome all and any information. Always with these stories. I always look forward to your comments, and I appreciate them. But yeah, let me know in the comments section down below. Also, don't forget, we still have merchandise available. I know it's brand new, but the link will always be in, especially the newer videos here, to the website merchandise store in the description. So if you guys see something you like, check it out. But with that said, I thank you so very much for joining me on this episode of Songs of the Great Lakes. This was number 5 of the Forgotten Vessels, and or the Forgotten Ships. Yeah, sorry, it's late of me recording this video right now. But yeah, I thank you so very much for this. Look forward again to the next episode coming hopefully soon in the future here. That'll be another amazing and unique type video, and should be good. So until then, God bless you all, and see you again on Songs of the Great Lakes.